President Trump is about to finalize an executive order to shutter the Department of Education, which has been a long-time Republican goal. Again, one of the things about Trump that is truly an amazing, amazing thing. There's so many promises that various politicians have made for decades. Ronald Reagan pledged to shut down the Department of Education in the 1980s, like about the time I was a baby. And Donald Trump is actually trying to do it. He's actually taking seriously the promises that he made to the American people. According to Politico, the Trump administration is finalizing plans to dismantle the education department through an executive order that would build on the president's campaign promise to hammer the longtime conservative target. The order was expected to lay out a two-part strategy for shuttering the agency, according to two people familiar with the plans. It would direct the department to craft a plan to wind down its functions using its existing administrative authority. But the order was also expected to call for the agency to inventory a complex set of laws needed to delegate the department's powers to other agencies and then shut down the department. So, in other words, many of the functions of the DOE would move outside the DOE, but the department itself would be shut down. That would require some sort of legislative help, presumably. According to a third person granted anonymity, representatives from DOGE are already working at the Education Department headquarters and seeking access to agency records. So, again, right now, Linda McMahon is up for Secretary of Education. There will be a Senate confirmation hearing. One of the sort of open strategy questions here is whether it would have been better to wait until she was confirmed in order to actually do this sort of thing. With that said, the fact that Trump is taking this so seriously is yet another indicator that he was serious about the things that he was promising. What exactly does the Department of Education do? Well, its number one spending priority in fiscal year 2024, according to usafacts.org, the U.S. Department of Education spent about $161 billion on federal student aid. So that would be, like Pell Grants and paying for people to get their degrees in lesbian dance theory and all the rest. Another $83 billion was spent on elementary and secondary education, which are basically block grants that are given to various states. Now, education should be a local consideration. Education should be controlled by the state, by the localities, by the local school board. Ideally, we'd have vouchers so people can actually, go to the school that they want to go to. There is no question the Department of Education is yet another gravy train for the left, one of the biggest gravy trains in America. The university system is a giant apparatchik for the left producing machine. It is a giant machine designed to churn out left-wingers with worthless diplomas, unless you're in the STEM fields. That is what it is designed to do. And by the way, if you're in the STEM fields, you can certainly get a private loan to study engineering at MIT. The reality that the reason Democrats are very, very in love with these agencies is, again, because they are permanent structures that are designed to pay all of their friends. Some of the biggest graft agencies in the history of mankind are happening via the Department of Education. Speaking of the education, higher education, by the way, a group representing white and Asian high school and college students filed a complaint Monday in federal court against the University of California, claiming that 9 of its campuses are still using racial preferences in admissions in violation of federal anti-discrimination laws. And that is almost certainly true. Many of these universities have vowed that they would essentially do affirmative action under another name. And now the lawsuits are coming fast and furious. The best way to stop all of that is to make Linda McMahon the Secretary of Education and allow her to go to work and to unleash Harmeet Dillon over at the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ to go after all of these universities that are acting in violation of law. I have no doubt that all of that is going to happen. And meanwhile, the cuts don't just stop at the Department of Education or USAID. Scott Bessent, who is the new Treasury Secretary, is ordering a freeze at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was always Elizabeth Warren's baby. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is basically just a way of blackmailing various businesses with regulatory oversight. That's what it always was. It is independently funded, so it actually does not even come from the legislature. The legislature does not appoint separate funding. This is actually the subject of the Supreme Court case. The question was whether it violated the separation of powers for Congress to set up a mechanism that was then funded directly from the Federal Reserve, which is how the CFPB works. Well, the only problem, again, Democrats, if you put all the power in the executive branch, what happens if people you don't like take over the executive branch? Well, now you're finding out. You did all of this in the assumption that even if a Republican was elected, the Republican would never touch your precious. Well, it turns out the Republicans are touching all of the things that you built, and they are taking control of those levers and using them in ways you didn't like. And this is the story of Lord of the Rings. If you don't want somebody you don't like controlling the ring, don't create the ring in the first place. But Democrats created it, and now they're very upset that the powers of the ring are being used by people they don't particularly like. Well, now, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has ordered a freeze to work at the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. In an internal email on Monday, Bessent's office directed CFPB staff to cease much of the Bureau's work, including enforcement actions and decisions about active litigation. The email directs staff to suspend the effective dates for rules that had been completed but aren't yet in effect. Bessent's appointment is the beginning of what is expected to be a rollback of many of the agency's actions under the Biden administration, which included rules capping overdraft fees and banning the use of medical debt by credit reporting companies. Biden appointee Rohit Chopra was ousted on Friday. Trump hasn't named a candidate to lead the CFPB on a permanent basis yet. But Bessent is looking forward to getting rid of the dead wood at the CFPB, which again has become a left-wing organization designed to hinder business in the United States. Senator Ted Cruz said last week that he would advance a proposal to cut the CFPB's funding entirely, which would effectively kill the Bureau. Meanwhile, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who built this thing, this is her legacy, aside from her legacy of wigwams and teepees, she said, quote, if President Trump and the Republicans decide they're just going to bend the knee to Wall Street billionaires and try to destroy that agency, they're going to have a fight on their hands. Well, they don't have to have a fight on their hands. Remember, Elizabeth, you're the one who set it up so it's independently funded outside the legislature. All that has to happen is Scott Bessent comes in and just freezes everything. Congrats to you. Genius level stuff happening over at the Congress of the United States. And again, because Trump is moving so fast, it is very, very difficult for Democrats to consolidate around any one line of argumentation. Okay, meanwhile, President Trump welcomed his first foreign leader to the White House yesterday. That first foreign leader is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There are all sorts of outstanding issues that the United States and Israel are working through. Those include the currently ongoing hostage deal with Hamas that eventually is going to come to an end. There is no way that Hamas can be allowed to run the Gaza Strip. That is not me saying that. That is Secretary of State Rubio. That is Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. That is National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. The entire leadership of the United States knows that this is not a real possibility, which means Israel will, in fact, have to go back in. Other outstanding issues obviously include the possibility of a Saudi deal and what happens with Iran. New information suggests that Iran, of course, is trying to race toward a bomb, figuring that they're on their last legs, that regime, and that the Trump administration is not going to be handing them pallets of cash worth billions of dollars, unlike the Biden or Obama administrations. They're rushing toward a cheaper, uglier form of the nuclear bomb. According to the New York Times, new intelligence about Iran's nuclear program has convinced American officials a secret team of the country's scientists is exploring a faster, if cruder, approach to developing an atomic weapon if Tehran's leadership decides to race for a bomb. The intelligence was collected in the last months of the Biden administration and relayed to President Trump's national security team during the transition of power. Now, the reality, again, is that effectively a single sortie of airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities would end their nuclear program for the moment, for a significant period of time. They have no air defenses. It turns out that all of their proxies are unbelievably weak. Israel completely destroyed Hezbollah's capacity to make forward war at minimum cost to itself. Israel hit Hezbollah so hard that its ally Assad fell in Syria. Hamas is no longer an offensive powerhouse. The Houthis have been largely quieted. Israel is doing heavy work in Judea and Samaria to shut down Iranian proxies in places like Jenin and Nablus. And so what that means is that Iran is uniquely vulnerable to things like an airstrike right now. All that the United States really has to do is give Israel the weaponry and get out of the way. And that would basically end the threat of an Iranian nuclear program for the moment. As the New York Times points out, Iran has never been weaker than it is today in the view of American and Israeli officials. Hamas and Hezbollah have lost their leadership and their ability to strike Israel. Syria's leader Bashar al-Assad has fled to Moscow. His country is no longer an easy route for Iranian weaponry. Apparently, Trump is indicating he's in no hurry to get into a direct conflict with Iran and is open to a negotiation, but the question is going to be what that negotiation looks like. I don't believe that President Trump is going to give away the store the same way that Biden and Obama were going to, and what verification measures could actually be taken to keep Iran from diving for a nuclear weapon. The Saudis certainly don't want it, and the Saudis are another American ally, aside from Israel, that the Trump administration is quite close with. It seems like the precondition for any sort of actual Abraham Accord deal between the Saudis and the Israelis is largely dependent on a forward move against the Iranian nuclear facilities. It'll be interesting to see where this goes. President Trump yesterday gave a nice little geographic disquisition on the state of the Middle East. Here he was.
It certainly is a small country in terms of land. See this pen, this wonderful pen? My desk is the Middle East, and this pen, the top of the pen, that's Israel. That's not good, right? You know, that's a pretty big difference. I use that as an analogy. It's pretty accurate, actually. It's a pretty small piece of land, and it's amazing that they've been able to do what they've been able to do when you think about it. There's a lot of good, smart brain power, but it is a very small piece of land, no question about it.
And he's right about that, obviously. President Trump told reporters, I have no assurances that the Gaza truce will hold. I have no guarantees the peace is going to hold, which, of course, is exactly correct. It is not America's job to ensure that, quote unquote, the peace holds. It's America's job to ensure that American hostages get out. It's America's job to ensure that its allies have the wherewithal to destroy terror threats. Right? That's all good for the United States. And President Trump, I believe, is going to do all of those things and more. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.